Crispy taco shells are not part of a carnivore diet unless you're in Chris Cookin' Nashville's kitchen. Taco Tuesday is back with Chris Cookin' Nashville. I'm going to show you guys how we make these crispy, crunchy carnivore taco shells. These things are fantastic. I've been working on them for a very long time. And once I figured out the secret to my potato chip recipe, which I'll link down below for you guys, I also figured out how I could make these. So let me show you guys how we do these crunchy taco shells. We're going to rewind to yesterday when I started this recipe. Everything sitting here in front of me is a carnivore crispy taco shell. Now, if you just said, what are you talking about? I'm right there with you, but you guys better stick around today because Chris Cookin' Nashville's kitchen is getting experimental and wild. So everything I have sitting here in front of me is going to lead us to crispy taco shells. Now, I've done carnivore tortillas before. I love those, but when you want a crunchy taco, you do not want to use a soft tortilla and try to convince yourself that it's crispy. Also, those carnivore tortillas, because of the way proteins cook, don't turn out crispy. You can't fry them or bake them or do anything to make them crispy because proteins, unlike starches, get very dry, crumbly, kind of burnt, and honestly a little off-putting if you try to cook them too far. So I had to come up with a solution of how we could make a crispy taco shell that would be 1, tasty, 2, easy to make, 3, would give you that crunchy texture you're looking for if you want a crispy taco shell. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I could make this work. I'm gonna get out a food processor. We're gonna put all of these things together and I'll show you as we go. The recipe card will be on my website, which is also linked down below for you guys. Let's make crispy taco shells carnivore style. So the first thing we need to start out with is cheese. We need the cheese proteins that are going to cook together, get crispy, but also bind everything together. Without that, we don't have the right structure. I'm using Swiss cheese. I've also done this with Monterey Jack. That works really well. If you like a really strong cheese flavor, you could certainly use something like a dry cheddar. I think Swiss cheese gives the least amount of flavor to this. Any kind of low flavored, low moisture, firm melting cheese should work just fine. This is 6 ounces, so I'm gonna shred this all up. I'm gonna use my S blade of my food processor after it is shredded, blitz that together and make it as fine grain as possible, and then I'll show you what we do next. So I have a real fine grain texture here. That texture is going to help us combine this with the other ingredients. So I have that shredded and blitzed up. I'm gonna go ahead and add in about an equal amount of cottage cheese, which for this is gonna be between a cup and a cup and a half. You don't have to have it exact. You just want it to be roughly 50% cottage cheese, 50% shredded cheese. Get yourself a clean cottage cheese that is full fat. Let me go ahead and add that in. We're gonna blend the two together with the food processor until we get a nice, smooth paste. So everything is blended into a nice, smooth, homogeneous paste. Now, something that is really helpful, a little tip for you guys, do this while both of these ingredients are cold because it keeps the proteins and the fats in the cheese firmer, which allows your food processor to blitz them up into smaller granules, and that'll make things a lot smoother for you in the end. Now that I've got those blended together, I'm gonna go ahead and add in 1 egg so that we can start to bring this mixture together into a batter. Now that our egg is fully mixed in, we can add in the rest of our ingredients. 2 tablespoons of pork rind crumbs. Now, if you don't eat pork, you could also use my chicken flour, which I will link the video for down below. This is just for texture, so you can leave it out if you don't have either one of those things, but it is really nice in the final product. So I'm gonna dump those in first. 3 tablespoons of unflavored gelatin. I'm using beef gelatin. You can certainly use the cheap Knox gelatin that comes from the store. That's pork-based, but if you're all right with that, that will work as well. Any unflavored gelatin is fine. The next thing I have is 2 tablespoons egg white powder. Now, because we're not whipping this mixture, if you're one of those people that ended up with egg white powder that has sunflower, lecithin, or something else in there, as long as that is okay for you with your particular diet, you can still use that egg white powder. So if you have some that you want to use up, but it won't whip up for things like my egg white bread, this is a place you can use that as long as you're okay with eating it. I'm going to add in 2 tablespoons of egg white powder. Next is 3 tablespoons of a whey protein powder. You could also use something like a beef isolate protein, something of that nature. Any kind of a carnivore protein would be just fine. If you don't have anything like this, or if you don't want to use anything like this, you can sub in 1 extra tablespoon of that egg white powder. I have one more ingredient here, but I'm gonna hold off on that for just a second. This is a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. It's going to react with a slight bit of acidity in the cottage cheese, and it's also going to change the way the protein structure works so that these bind together, because it's gonna soften the protein and break it down by making the mixture more alkaline. Baking soda is just a mineral mined out of the ground. Make sure you get a clean one. It's nothing but an alkaline salt as long as there's no additives in it. We're gonna add this in a moment, but first, let's combine all of our other powdered ingredients in with our paste completely. Now at this point, you're gonna wanna make sure to scrape down the sides. We don't want any clumps of powder or unblended cottage cheese or anything else stuck around the sides of the food processor. Now that all of our powders are blended in, I'm gonna go ahead and add in my baking soda. I'm gonna try to sprinkle it as evenly as I can around, just so we get as much incorporation as quickly as possible. Scrape down the sides one more time. And this is the texture that we are left with. We have a thick, sticky dough sort of texture. This is exactly what you want, because we're going to be squishing this down to turn this into tortillas. Now it looks really light colored right now. If you're okay with adding something that's not really carnivore, we can actually turn these yellow, but it's a totally optional step. I'll go ahead and show you how we do it, but if you struggle with things like oxalates or don't want to include this next ingredient in your diet, totally understand, just leave it this color. So I have some powdered turmeric here. Now, again, this is high in oxalates, so if you're one of those people that is trying to avoid oxalates, or especially if you're doing carnivore and you don't want to include anything like this, you can leave this out. They're just going to be a little bit more of a white, but if you want to include about a teaspoon of this to make them a little more yellow, feel free. And that gives us a nice corn tortilla looking kind of mix. Again, totally optional, but if window dressing is that important to you, you can totally do it. So now that our mixture is complete, the next thing we're going to do is put it down inside of a piping bag. You could also use a Ziploc bag and cut off the corner, just something that allows us to pipe it out into circles. So I have a couple of sheets of parchment paper here. I'm going to do 2 to 3, depending on the size of the parchment, tortillas. And then I'm actually going to cut around them so that we can put more of them on a single cookie sheet. While I'm doing this, I'm gonna preheat my oven to 275 degrees Fahrenheit so we can get ready to bake our tortillas, which is step number 1 to making these taco shells. All we need is something with a nice flat hard bottom so we can press these down into tortillas. Now we don't want to press them too thin because if we make them too thin, they're going to split easily. And when we go to make them crispy, they can break. So I have these pressed out to about the thickness of a nice corn tortilla. Just gonna take a pair of scissors and cut them all out. Now we're just gonna keep repeating the process until we have all of the tortilla batter shaped into the tortillas we're going to bake. You should be able to get easily a dozen of these 7 to 8 inch tortillas, if not more. Now we just need to add these to a baking sheet so we can put these in the oven. These are going to liquefy a little bit before they set because the melting temperature of cheese proteins is lower than the setting temperature of egg. That's why we need some kind of a sheet. They shouldn't spread much. They should be totally fine. And all of those protein powders, including the egg white powder and whey protein powder, are going to absorb a lot of that fat. It's part of the reason that this works the way that it does. So we're gonna go ahead and put these on a cookie sheet. These are gonna go into a 275-degree oven for 30 to 40 minutes. We do not want to overcook them. We just want to get them set, but we don't want to get them overly brown. So keep an eye on them, check with your oven temperature, make sure that you don't overcook them, but you do get them set into tortillas. So these took 35 minutes in the oven. I'm gonna go ahead and pull these off of the cookie sheet so that they can start coming down and they don't overcook. But as you can see, they are nice and firm and set as tortillas. We're gonna pull this off of the cookie sheet and then we're gonna do the next step before they cool down to room temperature. So they need to cool enough that you can handle them without burning your hands, but we want them to still be warm so that we avoid cracking. So let's go ahead and pull these off and let them start coming down a little bit closer to room temperature so we can handle them. As you pull these off the cookie sheet, you're going to notice there is moisture on top of them between the layers of parchment. That's actually a good thing. That moisture is going to help keep these from cracking or getting too dry while they're baking in the oven. That's also the reason for the low temperature, so we can get them baked all the way through without starting to make them too brown or crispy. The way you know that these are set is even while they're warm, we should be able to very gently grab a top sheet of parchment. You're gonna hold it at a very flat angle and pull it flat along the tortilla this way to very carefully peel that parchment away from your newly crafted carnivore tortilla. We're gonna turn it into a crispy taco shell using these taco molds that I have right here. We're going to lay the second sheet of parchment across this taco holder. So I have 3 points facing upwards and I can take my tortilla while it is still warm and lay it very carefully across the taco holder. I'm gonna go ahead and line 3 up. I will link these down below in case you guys would like to pick something like that up. Then we get these put into a dehydrator. If you don't have a dehydrator, you can use an oven set at 200 degrees, but it takes a long time. Your taco shells will start to brown. So ideally, much better if you can do this in a dehydrator, but worst case scenario, you can go ahead and do it in your oven. The timing is going to vary for everyone, so just check to make sure they don't get too brown or overly crispy. And that's how we do Chris Cookin' Nashville's Carnivore Crunchy Taco Shells. Now the real question is, do they taste as good as I think they look?
They look amazing. Nailed it. I mean, they look incredible.
Let's find out what they taste like.
Ah. Oh. Did you just make the greatest carnivore taco shell ever? You can hear the crunch? The crunch? Oh my gosh. This is so messy. Like in the best way, and I just don't even care. The crunch is totally there. It looks like the real thing. I don't taste anything off. Like I don't taste eggs, I don't taste cheese. It tastes like a taco shell to me. I mean, this is insane. I don't think I've ever loved you more than just right now. This is amazing, babe. I'll probably ask for you to make these on a regular basis.
We do a live stream every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. So I'll probably have to pick a different day of the week. But when I'm not making those recipes on Tuesday nights, we'll have another night that we can make taco night now.
Man, these are so good.
Well, there you go, guys. That is the crispy carnivore taco shell. I've got it all over me. It's all over the plate because you can't eat a crispy taco and have it not be messy. That's kind of one of the things that's fun about them, especially if you put enough stuff on the inside of the shell. I hope you guys enjoy this recipe. It's fantastic. Taco night is now back on the menu. We got a whole bunch of other things coming for you guys in store. It's going to be really fantastic. We got great recipes on the horizon. We also have a brand new private community. I'm going to link that down below because the shredded chicken that I used in the tacos is actually in there. It's a recipe I gave to my private members because they're the reason we can afford to keep doing this. They keep the channel afloat. My band is amazing. We would love to see you guys join us over there if you would like some extra support and some extra fun recipes, behind the scenes, all kinds of fun stuff. Thank you guys so much for being here. This is Chris Cookin' Nashville, my beautiful wife, Ash Taylor. You guys eat your meat, now your crispy tacos. Love your life. We're gonna see you here in the kitchen for a bunch of crazy recipes. And if you like these taco shells, you're gonna love this right over here.
Why did you give me one taco? We're gonna need more of those.